Scott, if your life had a face, I would punch it.
Yeah. Wait, what?
I never thought I would see the day, but Scott Pilgrim is back, baby!
In a world where movie adaptations of anime and video games
In a world where movie adaptations of video games and anime are largely misguided, usually by Hollywood just not understanding the source material, once in a while a rare gem manages to get by unscathed, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is one of those rare gems. Scott and his friends are in a band in Toronto trying to grow their budding musical career. The only problem is the rest of the band must constantly deal with Scott's personal relationship problems getting in the way of their dreams. In order to date Ramona, because they're totally not doing it already at all, Scott must defeat Ramona's 7 deadly exes. Okay, so maybe Scott Pilgrim doesn't actually count as a movie adaptation of a video game. Both are technically based on the comic book series by the same name, more so than each other, but there's still plenty of similarities between the two.
And by the way, I can't believe you asked Ramona out after I specifically told you not to do that.
How are you doing that with your mouth?
Never mind how I'm doing it.
But the movie makes it clear that it's actually built from the ground up, with the characters actually living in a video game, in a world that also has video games.
Hey, check it out. I learned the bass line from Final Fantasy II.
What do you play?
Zelda, Tetris.
The movie is littered with common retro video game elements such as scoring points, enemies turning into coins, UI elements, collecting extra lives, or even showing character statistics. But what the movie does count as is being a rare instance in which the movie is actually being faithful to its source material.
Sorry, what was your name?
Kim.
Can you play the drums?
Yes.
Does this mean we have to stop sleeping together?
See another bed in here?
Oh yeah. You're totally my bitch forever.
There's liberties taken to condense a series into a movie, but what's there is still pretty faithful compared to a lot of other adaptations. The movie came out 3 days after the game way back in 2010, and at least for me, the plot was too unbelievable for me to take seriously. I mean, a guy who has to defeat 11 of his girlfriend's evil exes?
7.
Oh, that's not that bad.
That's like a plot that was written by an 8-year-old whose only grasp of storytelling was Double Dragon. So, basically me at 8 years old. But it wasn't until after I played the game and not making a lick of sense out of the story that I decided to finally actually see the movie. And that's when I found out that the movie is actually fully aware of how ridiculous it is. And it's all the better for it.
What if life were more like a video game?
That's a question this movie answers with flying colors. The common classic video game trope where the hero literally fights for the girl, in a world where everyone else also inexplicitly knows how to fight, because video games. Back in 2010, the game was available at digital storefronts, but only after a few short years, it was delisted, making it impossible to play if you didn't already own it, and supposedly, if you already deleted it. But even if I would have bothered to dust off the old 360, it wasn't like I was actually going to risk deleting it just to find out. But Ubisoft has finally re-released it, and the game can now be enjoyed again on PC, consoles, and then some. But how does it hold up nowadays after its long absence? Well, it's the same game, only it includes both the Knives Chow and Wallace Wells DLC. It might be possible that we'll get an Envy Adams DLC, as it was recently revealed that the game's creator, Brian Lee O'Malley, that Envy was a cut DLC that never made it into the game due to budget cuts. There's no actual mention of it coming, but who knows. If the game sells well enough and garners enough attention, and you do that by liking this video, sub and all that jazz, we might actually see it. But even with those add-ons coming included in the game's one and only edition, how much enjoyment you'll be getting out of your $15 is dependent on either how much of a fan you were of the game back then, or if you've never played it at all and want to, but were late to the party after the game left digital shelves. If you're the latter, but you've never seen the movie before, do yourself a favor and watch the movie first. The comic too, I guess, if you're really hardcore. Got Netflix? Good, because it's on there right now. It seems weird releasing both the movie and the video game of each other around the same time, because if you're like me who played the game first, it's actually doing yourself a disservice. That's because the game hardly ever explains what's going on with the story outside of the intro and ending. And besides, you don't really play these kind of games with a story anyway, you just want to kick some heads in. There are cutscenes in between stages, but the game mostly lacks any dialogue whatsoever. Oh, and kissing. Just lots and lots of kissing. If it wasn't made already obvious from the movie, the game is a retro-styled side-scroller beat-em-up, similar to games like Double Dragon and Final Fight, but mainly River City Ransom. And much like that game, defeated enemies will drop coins, which you can use in shops to purchase food and other items, which are not only important to recovering lost health, but to also increase your character's stats. Unlike River City Ransom, the stats you gain are persistent when you come back to the game again to continue, or if you increase the game's difficulty. You have your standard go-to combos of light attacks and heavy attacks, but enemies will also give you XP, which you need to level up, which also unlocks additional moves. Most of them involve pushing a certain direction in addition to a light or heavy attack or when sprinting. The moves vary visually between each character, but that's it. This makes it easier to pick up on a new character easily, but it also means every character generally functions the same. This could be a good or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. Every character also has their own special move, which consumes their special meter, which can also be drawn from to call in knives to help you out. The game is more than just mindless button mashing or using the same combo over and over again, as enemies are generally smart enough to gang up on you, so it pays to actually know how long certain combos last and leave you vulnerable to attack from your backside. You'll be favoring certain moves over others, or ending a combo early to get out of harm's way, or even throw your enemies all to one side so everybody's facing you. And enemies are really good at stun locking you, or just be absolutely... Will you guys just... on, guys! And in classic video game fashion, at the end of each stage you'll face one of Ramona's evil ex-boyfriends.
X's.
And almost every fight resembles how Scott fights them in the movie. Ramona has some really heavy-handed baggage, as they all come with their own form of superpowers, such as summoning demon girls or attacking you with... produce.
That's really the whole story. Okay, fine, I had to fight a guy to be with her, okay? I fought a crazy 80-foot-tall, purple-suited dude, and I had to fight 96 guys to get to him. He was flying and shooting lightning bolts from his eyes, okay? And I kicked him so hard that he saw the curvature of the earth.
You can also come across multiple hidden bonus rooms, reminiscent of Super Mario for obvious reasons. In fact, it's the manyest references that this game makes is where the game truly shines. There's so many hidden Easter eggs that half the fun is trying to find them all. Whether it's from the comic, the movie, or even other video games entirely, there's always something that will catch your eye.
Well, then Gideon best get his pretentious ass up here, because I'm about to kick yours out of the Great White North.
Even when the game is not referencing anything, catching your eyes is an easy thing the game can do with its bold comic book style graphics. Each of the 2D pixel characters are animated with enough charm and appeal that the game is just a joy to look at. In fact, Paul Robertson, the game's graphic artist, carried this game's art style over into another game made 4 years later, Mercenary Kings. The game excels more than just its comic book vibe, but also in its sound too. The sounds made when you smack enemies in the face sound really satisfying, and makes it sound like you're really making an impact. The game's soundtrack, played by Anna Mataguchi, is an awesome mix of chiptune and punk rock, which fits the game's retro vibe perfectly. The most memorable probably being the game's main menu anthem, as well as the first stage's Another Winter. It's simply a soundtrack you just won't forget.
You know what really sucks, though?
What?
Now Scott may be able to defeat the League of Evil Ex-Boyfriends,
X's. Why do you keep saying that?
but he can't beat not being in a perfect game. And in this case, it's the game's rather weird pacing of difficulty.
It's hard.
Well, no, not really. Not because it's too difficult or too easy, but because it can easily go from one extreme to the other, depending on how willingly fast or slow you boost your character. Other than the lack of money, there's really nothing stopping you from stuffing your face with a ton of food all in one sitting. And even if you are short on funds, you can also just repeat previous stages to grind for money, as well as XP. While this is a normal thing with games today, The problem is the game's grind is almost a necessity. The damage you deal at the beginning of the game is absolutely pitiful, made worse with having to constantly wait for enemies to get back up so you can do more damage. It's not until you actually start upgrading yourself even just a little bit do you find out just how weak you were. I feel that it's exactly because of this reason is why the first stage gives a false impression of the game's length, which on your first try is more than likely going to be quite long. It's not until your 5th character level do you finally unlock an attack that can be used on enemies when they're down. At some point you'll run out of lives, making you have to start the entire level over. This is because unless you don't immediately repeat the first stage, and really, who would the first time, you simply won't have enough money to buy upgrades to keep the game's enemies escalating in toughness. While it seems annoying to have to do this in a game that's only 7 stages long, on the other hand, this game's progression is also very short. 100 is the max any one stack can go, which doesn't take that long to achieve anyway, but this seriously overpowers you even at the higher difficulties, at least in the early stages, making the higher difficulties actually more intended for playing with a brand new character, not existing ones. There's really no such thing as specializing in any one stat either, as time is really the only factor in your way from getting everything. This means every character, eventually, will be the same, with just a different skin. You can, however, reset any one character's stats back to 0, but this still means any variety in terms of character differences is going to have to be done on a personal level. Consuming items can also be a pain. When you consume an item at a shop, the game will tell you what stats increased after you eat it, and only briefly. So if you want to increase a certain stat, you're either going to have to write down what items do what, or just look it up. Which, let's be honest, is what any sane person's going to want to do. So why the game hasn't been updated to just tell you after you eat it after the first time is beyond me. I mean, this game is over 10 years old. I guess River City Girls, a modern spin-off of River City Ransom, spoiled me, so going back to this is a bit off-putting. Sure, even in the original River City game you could do this, but that game is even older. I know it's where it's derived from, but that doesn't mean everything has to be the same. In River City Girls, once you buy an item for the first time, it tells you what the items do from that point on. But in that game, food only restores health, while the other items that give stat bonuses can only be bought once. The other irritating issue is the game's movement. If you're going to be playing this game on a gamepad if you're on PC, and you should, you better have a decent and comfortable D-pad, because the analog sticks are hot garbage with this game. You have the option of choosing either quick tap or double tap for running. Double tap allows for the classic style of double tapping a direction to run, while quick tap makes you run if you flick the stick in a certain direction quickly. The problem is the difference between a quick flick or a slow movement of the stick is extremely minimal. Walking around is already ungodly slow enough in the beginning, but unfortunately there's plenty of times where running right into something can get you into trouble. Plus the standard attack combo can only be executed when not running. As a result, if you're going to use the analog stick, you end up running most of the time simply because you won't have time to gently push the stick in the heat of the moment. I don't know about you, but I don't have robotic fingers that can move slowly, quickly. And if that wasn't bad enough, there's a huge delay walking diagonally if you're not already pushing both directions at the same time. If you only move in one of the 4 cardinal directions and then slide your finger to push the second direction, you won't move that direction for about half a second. So if you want my suggestion, leave the option on quick tap, but use the D-pad, quickly swapping to the stick only if you plan on running in straight lines. I remember this being an issue a decade ago, and I'm a little miffed that it still remains in this new version. But if you can ignore these issues, then I'd say the game is still worth it for its price. The previous unlockable modes are all available from the start, but really the meat of the game here is the main story mode, and the ability to play up to 4 players in co-op, which new to this edition finally has the ability to connect to others online, something that was sorely needed way back in the 2010 version, which only had it locally. Although currently the game is suffering from some major issues online, so hopefully that gets taken care of soon. I haven't been able to get around to it personally, but it's what I've heard from others. Don't get me wrong, I still wish the game had a bit of quality of life improvements though, such as making the analog sticks not feel so sensitive or having a higher stat max with accompanying difficulties to go along with it, if only to make the game just a bit more replayable. But despite the game being short and a tad outdated, I still found myself really enjoying it once again. It's the game's world that I enjoy the most, and the dedication the devs gave into how well the game translates aspects of the comics and the movie into a video game. The movie probably being more popular and more well known, which by now has received such a huge cult following as well as being very quotable.
Your hair's getting shaggy.
Yeah?
And as fans of the movie know, characters having superpowers might have been a bit foretelling at the time, as it not only casts Brandon Routh, but even Marvel's Chris Evans and Brie Larson. The game's attention to detail is a testament of how every adaptation should be, and with Scott Pilgrim being 3 mediums at once that almost mimics each other, it's definitely a long time coming to finally see Scott return to shelves, both digitally and for the first time, physically. By today's standards, the game's enjoyment is very short-lived, but it's a moment that's so sweet that it makes me fall in... what's the word? It's an L word.
Lesbian?
The other L word.
Lesbians? I sort of feel like I'm on drugs when I'm with you. Not that I do drugs, unless you do drugs, in which case I do drugs all the time.
So, if you've never been able to play Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, well now you finally can. Just remember to at least watch the movie first if you haven't already. It's a pretty funny movie that you can eat something to. Just not bread.
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?